everyone, today we're going to be reading Don't Be Silly, Mr. Twiddle. Chapter 11, Mr. Twiddle Doesn't Like the Cat. "Now, Twiddle," said Mrs. Twiddle one morning when she had a letter from her cousin Amanda, "I think I shall have to go away for a day or two because my cousin Amanda is ill and she needs someone to look after her." "But I can't do without you," said Twiddle, quite alarmed at being left on his own. "Who will get my breakfast? And who will make the bed? And light the kitchen fire when it goes out?" "You will, Twiddle dear," said Mrs. Twiddle. "It's time you learnt a few things for yourself. It won't hurt you, and I shan't be gone long. Now, cheer up and don't look so alarmed." "Will you take the cat with you?" asked Twiddle. He didn't like the cat, and the cat didn't like him. "I don't feel as if I can possibly look after the cat." "Well, you must," said Mrs. Twiddle firmly. "Of course I shan't take her with me. I shouldn't do such a thing. Don't be silly. The cat's no trouble." "It's no trouble to you, but it's a great trouble to me," said Twiddle, thinking of the many times that the cat had tripped him up, jumped onto his middle when he was asleep, and stolen fish of all kinds that he was going to have for breakfasts or suppers. "That cat is a great nuisance. I shall not look after her." "You are not to talk like that, Twiddle," said Mrs. Twiddle in such a sharp voice that Twiddle thought that he really had better not say any more. But he was really upset to think that Mrs. Twiddle was going away and leaving him to look after himself and the cat. Mrs. Twiddle packed a small bag and told Twiddle to remember ever so many things. "The milkman has been, so there is plenty of milk for your tea. The baker will come soon. There's an herring for your supper and a kipper for your breakfast. You know how to fry them because you have seen me do it plenty of times. There are 2 eggs in the larder as well, so you can have those if you want to." "Yes, love," said Twiddle, trying hard to remember everything. "And don't forget to give the cat her milk every day and get her into the house at night," said Mrs. Twiddle. "And don't let her sleep on the beds." "Certainly not," said Twiddle, quite determined about that. "Well, I hope Amanda will be better soon, my dear, and that you can come home, and I shall miss you very much." "Goodbye, Twiddle dear," said Mrs. Twiddle. "And don't leave the front door open when you go out, and don't let the kitchen fire out if you can't help it, and don't leave the taps running, and you'll miss your boss," said Twiddle, who didn't like all this daunting. "Goodbye, love. Take care of yourself." Mrs. Twiddle went, and Twiddle trotted off into the scullery to do the washing up. The cat was sitting on the windowsill washing herself. "You're always washing yourself," said Twiddle. "Can't think why you don't get as dirty as all that. Now you listen to me, cat. I've got to look after you, but any nonsense from you and I'll get you spanked." "Whoosh," said the cat rudely. "Don't hiss at me like that," said Twiddle, running the hot water into the bowl. The cat watched him, and then she jumped down, rubbed against his legs, and mewed. "What are you doing that for?" asked Twiddle. "You only want that when you want something." "You've had your milk. I saw Mrs. Twiddle giving it to you." The cat gave up rubbing against Twiddle's legs because he kept pushing her away. She strolled into the kitchen, which was empty. She jumped onto the breakfast table. The jug of milk was still there. The cat began to lick, trying her hardest to reach the milk. When she had licked a little of it, she put up her paw to try and get the milk nearer, and over went the jug. The milk streamed across the table. The cat was pleased. Now there was plenty. She began to lick it up. Twiddle heard the noise of the falling jug and came to see what it was. He was very angry, and when he saw the spilt milk and the spoiled tablecloths, he tried to smack the cat, but she put out a paw and gave him a sharp scratch, and then leapt out of the window. "Bother the thing," said Twiddle, annoyed. He bathed the scratch and then went on with the washing up. When he had done that, he tidied the kitchen and swept down the scullery. Then he felt very tired and wanted to sit down in his armchair. He took up the paper, but he didn't read much of it because he fell asleep. Mrs. Twiddle said that Twiddle could go to sleep at any hour of the day, and this was quite true. Twiddle really enjoyed his nap when something landed with a jerk onto his middle and then set it down heavily, digging pins into him all the time. He woke up with a jump. The cat was lying peacefully on him, digging her claws in and out, purring loudly. Very comfortable and happy. Twiddle was very angry. He tried to shake the cat off, but she clung to him with all her claws. "How many times have I told you not to jump on me like that?" shouted Twiddle in a fine old rage. "You made me into a sort of bed for yourself and always wait till I'm asleep before you jump. I won't have it." He shook the cat off at last, shooed her to the door and slammed it behind her. Then he set it down again. But the cat came in at the window, waited by the fire till Twiddle was sound asleep and snoring a little. Then he jumped up onto his middle once more. Twiddle awoke again with a jump and the cat leapt off. Poor Twiddle, he decided not to sleep anymore. The cat didn't mean to let him. Anyway, Twiddle went to the larder and wondered what to have for his dinner. The baker came whilst he was wondering, and Twiddle went to get the bread from him. He left the larder door open. "Look at that cat," he said to the baker. "She's the most annoying, interfering cat you ever saw. I suppose you don't want a cat, do you?" "Well, I've rats in the bakery," said the baker. "I don't mind having her. If she'll catch them, I'll keep her." "Well, you can have her and welcome," said Twiddle. He ran after the cat, pounced on her and popped her into a sack. The baker put her into his cart and drove off. Twiddle was very pleased. "Now that cat can't interfere with me anymore," he said, rubbing his hands together. "I shall have the kipper for my supper, now that she has stolen my herring, and I'll have an egg for my breakfast." Twiddle thought it was very nice. Without the cat, he could leave the larder door open if he wanted to. He could leave the milk on the table. He could go to sleep without being waked up with a jump. When his supper time came, he cooked the kipper. It smelled good. He put it on a plate and carried it carefully to the kitchen. But suddenly he tripped over something and fell down with a crash. The plate broke. The kipper shot into the air and disappeared. Twiddle banged his head hard against the wall. "Meow," said a voice, and Twiddle saw the cat sitting down in the passage looking at him. "So it was you that tripped me up, was it?" said Twiddle, very angry and most surprised to see the cat after he had given it to the baker. "Why have you come back again for?" "Leave that kipper alone." The cat had suddenly smelled the kipper, which had landed onto a nearby chair. It jumped up and pounced on it. It fled out of the door with it. "Well, it looks like I'm never going to have any meals in this house whilst this cat is about," thought poor Twiddle. "Herring gone, kipper gone, it's too bad." Twiddle was so angry that when it was time to lock up the house, he didn't open the door and call the cat in, as he usually did. No, he let it stay out in the cold, the horrid, thieving animal. It ought to be sitting in the bakery catching mice. So the cat was left out, and Twiddle went to bed. He fell asleep and had an awful dream. He dreamt that somebody made him lie down flat on the ground and then piled bricks on his tummy higher and higher. Poor Twiddle woke up suddenly and wondered what that heavy weight was on top of him. The cat, of course. It had jumped in at the bedroom window, meaning to go downstairs and find its basket. But the bedroom door was shut and it couldn't. So it had jumped onto Twiddle and settled down there, warm and comfortable. "Well, that's the last straw," said Twiddle in a rage, heaving the cat off the bed. "Tomorrow I shall sell you. Yes, I do. I sell you. So make up your mind to it, cat. You're going to be sold." Twiddle meant what he said. The cat managed to trip him up twice the next day, and then Twiddle caught her and put her into a box. He shut down the lid, tied it with a string, and set off. He walked about 2 miles and came to a small cottage where lived an old woman who was very fond of cats. She had once been to tea with Mrs. Twiddle, and she had taken such a fancy to the cat that she offered to buy it. But Mrs. Twiddle wouldn't sell it. It didn't take Twiddle long to sell the cat to the old woman. He got 25 new pence for her, and she was very pleased. He thought that she would spend the money on beautiful roses to put into Mrs. Twiddle's bedroom. So she stopped at the flower shop and bought a pretty bunch of red and pink ones. When he got home, he found a telegram from Mrs. Twiddle. Amanda is better, returning home this afternoon. Good, thought Mr. Twiddle, pleased. He set to work to clean the house and make it nice for Mrs. Twiddle. He went out and bought a meat pie and some tarts. He put the roses into water and they made the bedroom smell beautiful. Mrs. Twiddle came home and was pleased to see everything looking so nice. And she simply loved the roses. "Oh, how beautiful," she cried. "How kind of you, Twiddle dear. Where did you get the money from? They must have cost quite a lot of money." Twiddle suddenly felt that he didn't want to explain about selling the cat. He cleared his throat, smiled rather nervously, and stared at Mrs. Twiddle. I might have sold the cat, mightn't I?" he said with a queer little laugh. "Of course you won't do such a thing like that," said Mrs. Twiddle. "What, be so cruel and unkind to sell my dear darling old pusscat that I love? Don't be silly, Twiddle. You know if you did a thing like that, I'd chase you out of the house with my umbrella and not let you back in again until you brought the cat back." This was very alarming. Twiddle had no idea that Mrs. Twiddle would feel like this about the cat. He went very red and felt really frightened. "But I'm sure you haven't sold the cat. You bought me lovely, lovely roses." "Out of your own money," said Mrs. Twiddle, and gave poor Twiddle a big kiss. "And now where is Puss? I thought she'd be here to greet me." Twiddle began to tremble, thinking that he would surely be chased out of the house with an umbrella in a minute or two. And then a most surprising thing happened. The cat ran at the door, went straight to Mrs. Twiddle, rubbed against her skirt, and made some very loving noises. "You darling, you came to greet me after all. Where were you? Did you know that Twiddle said he might have sold you? Isn't he a naughty storyteller?" Twiddle was very thankful to see the cat, but dear, dear, how was he going to make it up to that old woman who had bought her? The cat must have run away from her and come all the way home. She would be sure to come back and call and ask if the cat had come back. "There's one more thing to be done," thought Twiddle gloomily. "I must empty my pockets and see if I have enough money. I must take it to her and say the cat is back. Then perhaps Mrs. Twiddle will never know how foolish I have been." Poor Twiddle took back most of his pocket money, so the old woman who had bought the cat. He couldn't buy any tobacco, sweets, or papers for a week. Poor Twiddle. I don't suppose you'll ever really like the cat now, do you? Thank you very much for listening. Until next time, it was me, Mira. Goodbye. Switch off your telly, put away your phone.